Why don't we start off? For anybody joining us today, we're talking to Corey Gillon. Corey is the CEO of Choom Brands. Follow them on Instagram. It's Choom Brands, and it's actually Choom Holdings is the name of the company. So welcome, Corey. And so we've been doing this cannabis. It started off as Cannabis Week. It's now wrapping up, and it's gone for the whole month of May. For our audience members that might not know Choom, the name, there's a story behind that. Do you want to maybe start off with that?
Yeah, you bet. Welcome for all the folks who might be watching today. Pleasure to tell a little bit about the Choom story. And Choom in itself is a cannabis retailer in Canada. Our operations span three provinces: Ontario, BC, and Alberta, based here on the West Coast in Vancouver. The Choom is.
I think I lost you there for a second. You're back.
That's story brand business, something that we feel was somewhat absent in the cannabis retail market in Canada. And it's a neat story. It's based on a bunch of friends in the 1970s Hawaii that like to kind of, amongst other things, hang out, do lots of fun stuff like surfing and skateboarding, that sort of thing. And then enjoy partake in a little choom. And choom in this case is a Hawaiian word, and it's to partake in the act of smoking pakalolo, which is the Hawaiian word for cannabis. So if you're doing some choom, you're essentially kind of smoking some weed, essentially, and or whatever it is that you might partake in. And the reason why it's interesting as a story beyond kind of the 1970s kind of feel in Hawaii was this Choom gang included a pretty interesting character, and was Barack Obama was a member of this Choom gang. So the story, the brand. I think if you're going to align yourself with somebody, Barack Obama's a pretty cool cat. We haven't had him endorse anything lately, but listen, it's a good
you never
story,
know,
talks about
right?
it.
You never know. I like the branding on that surfboard in the back there that you have.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
So you guys have actually just opened your flagship store.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, we just opened on the 15th of May.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Quite a testament. A lot of that was happening throughout kind of the pandemic. So when I talk about team coming together and being able to work effectively, whether it be with the internal team or with our partners, certainly that was a challenge, but I think a challenge that was taken well by the team and again many of our partners in terms of the build out. And I think from our perspective, it's we're very happy with the store, and I think the one thing that when you attach Flagship to it is it's probably the best iteration of our brand so far. And I think that us at Choom, we want to be more excited about every store that kind of comes up, and certainly this is just a great iteration of that.
So you guys are there in the Olympic Village, West 2nd.
Yeah, you bet. So it's quite the location. Certainly gives it away, the Olympic Village. So for the 2010 Winter Olympics, where all the athletes were housed, that turned into a full development afterwards, and certainly become a bit of a reusable space.
It's interesting how so many people at that time were against that development.
Isn't that the truth?
Because it was empty for a while after the Olympics, but it's such a cool neighborhood now.
Absolutely.
For our listeners that are here in Vancouver, I'd definitely say go check out their store. So you guys, obviously your team had a big part in getting that done. What about your role as the CEO and managing your teams? Did you notice that it changed a bit? You guys have obviously adapted well to the work from home. Working from home that we've all been doing. But did you notice that your management style, leadership style, did you have to adjust or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think that I think as a leader, certainly at times you have to draw from many tools that you might have in your tool belt, and I guess that's being adaptable. And certainly throughout my career, that has been, different times call for different styles. And I think in this particular case, if I could kind of summarize it, it became a time where you needed to lead more from the front. And
Absolutely.
and I think in previous periods coming up to that, maybe you were a little bit more from the middle or from the back in many cases. So I think from that standpoint, that was clear, and whether that was throughout this project or with our retail teams out in stores and making sure that. I can remember being on a daily call at times with our store leaders, kind of moving into a weekly call thereafter. Making sure that we're here to support teams and making sure that they're aware that they're not in this alone as well.
So you guys have one location here in Vancouver, which is the Flagship, correct? And then you
Correct.
have Alberta and Ontario. Is that correct?
You bet. Yeah, we're kind of bookmarked in the country with essentially our two flagship businesses. One in Niagara, which was the initial concept store of the brand a bit before my time. That was one of the initial lottery winners, a lady named Lisa Begioni, who was a great partner with Choom throughout that period. And we ended up acquiring that business as of April 1st officially. So that's somewhat as recent, but always had a very good connection and partnership with Lisa throughout that transaction. On the second side, Vancouver being in the middle, and then predominantly the remainder of our stores are in Alberta.
How many do you have in Alberta?
So we have a total of 18 stores. So we have 16 total stores in Alberta. There were 6 stores that we closed right at the beginning of the pandemic. We temporarily closed those businesses. They were all fairly new coming online. And we'll look to kind of bring those back online throughout the remainder of the calendar year as it progresses.
As we progress there. Interesting. Was there any other ways that this pandemic affected your business other than having to close a couple of locations?
Yeah, I think a bit mixed. I think it just really was dependent, on things were just changing so rapidly and so quickly, and really kind of put, I think the business, the sector, to the test. And one of the funny kind of outtakes, if you can find one in this, is you go from illegal to essential in the course of about 18 months. So
Yeah.
saying that, if I looked at the Ontario business as an example in a Niagara store, we ended up closing fairly quickly after our transaction on April 1st. That put us in a pretty difficult position in terms of it being such a breadwinner to the business overall. And then we need to adapt to an online click and collect or curbside model that essentially happened over the course of about 24 hours. And, coming from another retail background again, I mean those changeovers are more like in 3 to 6 month, 12-month kind of period. So I think kudos to the sector in total, and certainly to our team. And I think from in Alberta, predominantly throughout it has been, a continuation of continue to go throughout this, and no essential, no closures, if you will. But I think 2 things. I think making sure that we're making sure first and foremost our clients and people were safe, felt safe, had the right to self-isolate in many ways that they may needed to. Certainly, many leave of absences that would occur during that time. So challenging nonetheless. And I think from a consumer standpoint, we've seen different behaviors start to develop. There was a period of kind of loading up, for lack of a better word, kind of prior to or right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Before the lockdown or.
Exactly. So there was much of that. We've seen a continuation of that in many cases in our Alberta business, as an example. Is continued growth and continued, I would put it as 2 things: not only basket size and traffic growing, but the size of product necessarily maybe they were purchasing. So if they were purchasing a 3.5 gram, dried flower item prior, in many ways now they're moving up to maybe a 28 gram or 1 ounce. So that's, I think during that time frame, those things took place. I think then just overall, we're seeing in Vancouver, as an example, is quickly into categories of the 2.0 have been much more prevalent to what our consumers are looking for, and I think that's good for us at the end of the day as well.
Interesting. So what about the brands that you guys have? Do you want to maybe talk to our audience about that? And for anybody listening, just before you begin, I know you've only got a short window for us to get through this stuff. If anybody has any questions, we'll try to get them towards the end. There is a comment box towards the bottom. Feel free and submit them there. I think I see one already, and we'll try to get those all out to Corey. So yeah, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, I fundamentally think what we are as a retail business is we are, we're a house of brands, essentially purveying other people's brands, and I think making sure that we have the products that essentially the Canadians want in the markets that we're in is critical. So. When I look at big partnerships that certainly we've partnered with along the way, certainly Aurora's been a big portion of our initial kind of planning, and from the initial kind of steps of the company, that's always been kind of a handshake agreement with the business, but certainly we kind of aligned ourselves there to a certain degree.
Okay.
And I think you kind of go through. You'll see a lot of San Rafael is a great brand for us.
That is a great brand.
Kind of driven throughout the stores, and it kind of aligns very well to our in-store marketing, our vibe, and our feel. And then and some other partnerships that we've just recently kind of brought into play with a bit with a store within store model of Dosist, which will be installed in our Olympic Village store here in about 2 weeks, and we're pretty excited about that. And I think what we see from that, in particular in a very urban location like Olympic Village, is we're seeing that there's a demand for that, and we believe that retail location would have a bit more of an elevated approach in many ways. And the key was to also find brands that are not only elevated in some ways, but also approachable to both men and women. And I think Dosist does a great job of that and will be in this location. Absolutely.
You spoke about the vibe. Want to tell us a little bit about the vibe of the store and how it is different from some of the other dispensaries or locations people might be visiting?
Sure. Yeah. I would like it into, 2 or 3 things. I think, first and foremost, you're going to get, a very elevated feel as you kind of come into the store. And we put that on our windows as an elevated experience. So what does that mean? It's easy to say. When you come into the store, there is, you'd move into very much a look and feel of the actual Choom story. So whether that, and that story is told throughout the store in multiple ways. And I'd call that kind of discovery. And as you flow through the store in terms of that experience, we have a lot of symbols that we draw into the customer experience. So our surfboards, as an example, are handcrafted by a company in Victoria, and we try to tell that story. That certainly we've become not only a very small handcrafted surfboard company that we certainly support across our business, but again, there's a bit of romanticism I think that comes with that.
You cut out there a little bit.
Oh, sorry. The surfboard side, and I think
it cut off there a little bit, but
you can kind of go a bit. The other piece that you'll see in the symbols is the Choom wagon. So you'll see that heavily focused on in the retail setting. And I think what we tell from that, and if you had a chance to see any of these photos that we've been kind of putting around and maybe had circulated, or a chance even to see the store, we try to tie in much of what the Choom wagon meant to the Choom gang, as an example, in the store. So you'll see much of that throughout. But discovery, I think, would probably be one of the greater leverages in terms of experience.
I personally haven't had a chance to come to your location yet. I've been stuck indoors. But I'm definitely looking forward to stopping by and getting that vibe and taking a look at the wagon and all the other cool stuff that you guys have going on. So what's next for Choom? You guys have obviously had aggressive growth. You've got 18 locations, I think you said.
You bet.
So what's next?
Yeah, I think it's four pillars to the business in terms of where we're focused. And I think, I came into the business, and back it up a little bit, came into the business essentially as the CEO in December. So a lot of assessment needed to take place. I'd been in a previous 2 months just to kind of learn and get my regulatory kind of sign-offs, all those sorts of things. But making the assessment to now, what are we going to do as a business, and what are we going to look like for the next 2 or 3 years in a sector, in an industry that seems to change by the week.
Absolutely.
It certainly does. So four pillars for us. I think the first bit is, it's the financial side, and it's two things that we're really focused on. One, responsible new store growth. As the business moves forward, and our kind of aspirations is about 32 to 35 stores in the next 3 years. The second piece for us is to optimize our base business, and I think that that has been some very big impacts and wins that we've already achieved, whether that's through our operating model, through our focus on a central operating system, or whether that's through margin improvement, through assortments in store. So that's kind of the financial piece. The second piece is the brand, and we'll continue to propel that through our Choom story. We believe that is a bit of a differentiator for us in the space, and we'll continue to drive that, and why it drives customer affinity. Culturally, as is the third bucket for us around culture. What does that mean? For us, that is enabling and rewarding high performance, and creating that culture. And we've started to do that very much in stores as over the past few months in our compensation models, and we're starting to see some really great return and engagement from our teams. And then finally, the fourth pillar is our operations, and it is invest in best-in-class infrastructure. And so we're in that period now. We're coming through that period. We're going to start to see some of those payoffs in the next few quarters.
Got it. You mentioned culture. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Not only your internal culture with your staff and your colleagues, but what about the community? Are you guys, what's their response been like?
Yeah. I think internally, if I think about the culture of Choom, and certainly, that starts at the top, like any other business. And I think early on, that has been something that I'm very proud of, in terms of how the importance we put on hires, and bringing new people in. The fit's going to be very critical. And it's really three things internally that we message, or that we certainly kind of talk about. The first one is that everyone should have a say, and I think that's really important in a culture and in a business. That's critical for us to be successful. The second piece is that we have really clear work contracts. I know what I do, so I'm very clear about when I'm winning or losing, and I think that's critically important. And the third bit for us is diversity. We want to make sure that we have both men and women on the team as an example to be successful, and we have a good diversity of thought throughout the organization. So that's kind of the message internally, and certainly something that we strive to be. And as a support office, and the reason we call it a support office is we certainly look at ourselves here as servant leaders to our sales teams and our educators in store.
Got it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any plans to expand in other locations other than Alberta, Ontario, and BC, or are those the focus right now?
Yeah, there's certainly the focus right now. There's certainly conversations with investors at time. I hear, would you move to the US? There's some licensing opportunities opening up in Manitoba or Saskatchewan, or wherever the case might be. But I think we've got enough on our plate now to say this is where the next few years looks like. Certainly always open opportunity. I think the additional pillar will likely start to come in some of the infrastructure payoff that we'll put into the digital side, and start to see that may very well be a future play for cannabis retail as well. So I think collectively always open to opportunities, but being very kind of clear about where we want to be and what we want to do.
Very good. The time's just flying by. We definitely got to get you on either one of our podcasts or on another live when you have more time, and
Sure.
We can go through a lot of stuff. There is a question here. I'll go through that so we don't miss it. well, I think you already covered this, but Daniel here wants to know, how is Choom navigating COVID and serving customers safely? And what are the growth plans? So you've already gone through the growth plans, but what sort of preventative measures are you guys taking? I know you mentioned curbside delivery and stuff like that, curbside pickup, actually.
Yeah, I think, from our side, I think we were in quite early in terms of being an essential service. You started to look at, how are we going to do this well, and put a lot of responsibility, not only from our client standpoint, that they're going to feel safe to enter a Choom store, but also certainly our people were going to feel that way. So I think we did a good job of looking around, seeing what other industry players, predominantly looking at grocery, was probably, they were certainly early leaders and certainly strong at what they do, and took some of those practices back into stores. So we were up very early with plexi screen shields at all of our checkouts, monitoring how many people per square foot could be in the store, markers on the floor throughout, certainly kind of cleaning protocols. Much of now, which I believe is in many cases an expectation almost, is what people are starting to expect. But certainly being on the front side of that, I think was critical for us to not lose trust, and I think that was really and continues to be really important for both our people and our clients.
I think that's a great sort of outlook on that whole aspect of what we're all going through right now, and lots of businesses. So I do appreciate that insight. Corey, why don't you talk to us about where our audience members can find more details on not just your locations, but what you guys are working on, and why don't you tell them what your website, ticker, and all that stuff as well?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Choom brand. Follow us on Instagram. There's a good spot to kind of see what we're up to. We're pretty jazzed about what we do in the social side of things. So if you want to get the look and vibe and feel of the business, and certainly hopefully some good content throughout. And then choom.ca. So coming onto the site, a little bit more information, potentially whether you're looking for a career, and hopefully I'm speaking to some folks in terms of always looking for great talent to bring into the business, and additionally from an investor standpoint. So I think for the most part, that's where you can find us.
Perfect. I can leave the floor with you if you want to. Do you have any message for the audience members? I mean, they're here to hear from you. So what do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, I think, I appreciate having the time. This is my first Instagram Live, so thank you, Anil, for giving me the opportunity
we got to thank the CSE for that.
Yes, there you go. Giving a bit of a venue to tell a little bit about the Choom story, and we're pretty excited about what we're doing, and I would say we're just getting started, so we're pretty excited.
Absolutely. I'm actually really looking forward to when we can have a longer conversation and go through a lot of stuff, and hopefully we can get you back on in the coming months or something. You have more to talk about.
Absolutely.
But we do truly appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us even briefly. This is the wrap up of Cannabis Week, Cannabis Month, actually. 5/20 is what we call it. And for our audience members, I hope you like our content. If you want to go to YouTube at CSE TV, you can take a look at all of our stuff there. Follow us on all our social media channels. We've got, obviously Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all the usual stuff. You can find us there under Canadian Securities Exchange. And we look forward to having you again. And thanks to the CSE for giving us this platform where we can talk to gents like you and get to know what's happening on the inside of the cannabis space.
Awesome. I appreciate the time.
Not a problem, Corey. Thank you very much, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Cheers.